For years, there have been whispers of the possibility of terraforming the planets around us for our own habitability. Topping the list in these conversations are Mars, Proxima b, and even our own moon. While these planetary bodies hold some promise, several factors like low gravity, a thin atmosphere, lack of oxygen, the stuff you need to breathe, and the assault of cosmic radiation make the task of terraforming extremely daunting, if not impossible. One planet that doesn't come up in the conversation too often is Venus. That's right, the fiery hellscape. But don't be so quick to judge. Venus, with its proximity to Earth, higher gravity, and dense atmosphere, does bring some perks to the table and has the potential to become our next home. Join us today as we show you Earth's hotter sister and why it might be our best option for life outside of Earth. When humanity succeeded in sending a spacecraft to Venus back in the 1960s, it revealed that the planet had very thick clouds, and our imaginations ran wild, wondering what was beyond these clouds. Venus had always been considered our sister planet, being about the same size and mass as Earth. With the idea that it might also harbor life, interest in Venus peaked as we sought answers to our own existence and purpose. Would Venus turn out to be a lush green paradise, abounding with breathtaking beauty as it had long been represented throughout history? Unfortunately, the first probes that landed on Venus revealed a world that could not have been more disappointing. The atmosphere was plagued with poisonous greenhouse gases, and its average surface temperature could melt lead. If these characteristics weren't bad enough, the atmospheric pressure was also found to be crushing, a full 90 times more than here on Earth. With this frighteningly disappointing discovery, our attention shifted more to Mars. But some die-hard Venus lovers refused to give up the search, and that tenacity paid off. In more recent years, scientists learned that about 50 to 60 kilometers, or 30 to 37 miles above the surface, Venus has an atmospheric pressure that is essentially the same as sea level on Earth, and the temperature up there is around 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty nice. This led to theories of cloud living on Venus. More on that later. Then, in 2020, there was evidence of potential microbial life living in the clouds at that particular altitude. Scientists speculated that this microbial life had adapted to survive in the high clouds of Venus. While that claim has been disputed, it sparked new interest in Venus, which motivated the European Space Agency, NASA, and the Indian Space Research Organization to schedule missions to Venus as early as next year. Why? Same as always, the search for life. That's why NASA's administrator, Bill Nelson, announced that there will be 2 new missions to Venus. These missions were selected as the newest of NASA's Discovery program. With a scheduled launch for 2030, the missions Da Vinci Plus and Veritas will mark NASA's first return to Venus in about 40 years. If you thought that was all, the European Space Agency announced that its Envision mission is also headed for Venus. As we mentioned, Da Vinci Plus and Veritas are both part of NASA's Discovery program. The Discovery program is focused on missions that can be carried out quickly without too many resources. Da Vinci Plus is short for Deep Atmosphere Venus Investigation of Noble Gases, Chemistry, and Imaging Plus. The Plus is a result of changes made to the program since its inception. The spacecraft is expected to carry 4 cameras known as VISOR, that stands for Venus Imaging System for Observational Reconnaissance, and is expected to make 2 flybys of Venus in 2030. One of VISOR's cameras will be sensitive to UV light in order to track cloud motion, while the remaining 3 cameras will be sensitive to near-infrared emissions from the planet's surface. After its 2 flybys, the Da Vinci probe will then drop into Venus's atmosphere. This probe, which is made of titanium, is packed with instruments that will analyze the Venusian atmosphere from the clouds all the way down to the planet's surface. Tailing Da Vinci Plus will be Veritas. Veritas, which is short for Venus Emissivity, Radioscience, INSAR, Topography, and Spectroscopy, is a mission to map out Venus's surface in order to understand the planet's geological history and why it developed so differently from ours. With a synthetic aperture radar, the Veritas orbiter will map out surface elevations throughout the planet to produce 3D topographic reconstructions and determine if volcanism and plate tectonics are still active on Venus. As a side note, Venus has more volcanic structures than any other planet in our solar system. The Veritas radar will be able to penetrate Venus's clouds and map the surface down to 30 meters per pixel. And for really interesting features, the spacecraft can make scans that raise the resolution to 15 meters per pixel. That's an incredible 10 times finer than what was captured by the Magellan, the first spacecraft to image the entire surface of Venus back in the early 90s. Veritas is supposed to map Venus in 4 Venusian days. That may not sound like much until you find out that 1 day on Venus equals 243 days on Earth. Even more strange is the fact that 1 day on Venus, 243 Earth days, is longer than 1 year on Venus, only 225 Earth days. Da Vinci and Veritas are scheduled for launch around 2030 and are expected to answer a lot of questions about Venus. While NASA has shown strong interest in Venus, the planet has also caught the eyes of the European Space Agency, the ESA, and the Indian Space Research Organization, the ISRO, with both planning earlier missions to Venus. In fact, the ISRO would have launched its Shukrayan mission this year if not for delays caused by the COVID pandemic. The Shukrayan will investigate Venus for 4 years and have a payload capacity of roughly 100 kilos. These missions all aim to answer one question: is Venus habitable for life? And besides everything we've already mentioned, there is another major reason why the planet doesn't come up often when talking about planets that humans can live on. It is hot. Like really hot. Venus is the hottest planet in our solar system, with surface temperatures up to 482 degrees Celsius or 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Venus's average surface temperature will melt lead. Unsurprisingly, the spacecraft of the first missions to Venus didn't last so long. Truth be told, this newfound love for Venus and its exploration isn't actually so new. Our curiosity about this nearby planet goes back quite a ways. Popularly regarded as Earth's sister planet, there was a lot of focus on Venus early in space exploration. The planet was the first to be visited by a spacecraft, the Mariner 2, on December 14, 1962. The data gathered from this 42-minute scan changed how we see Venus. It revealed the true nature of Venus as a hellscape. Over the next 6 decades of exploration, Venus's surface would prove its true treachery. Complete with sulfuric acid rain, the image of Venus as a verdant wonderland was totally dismantled. Following Mariner 2, the Soviet Union spacecraft Venera 4 was the first to transmit information from the Venusian atmosphere. The spacecraft reported an atmospheric composition of almost 95% carbon dioxide. Venera 4 was quickly followed by 5 and 6. These twin spacecraft performed flybys of Venus in 1969. They both also descended through the planet's atmosphere and reported on Venus's temperature and pressure. That is before the very temperature and pressure they were reporting on destroyed them. Despite a rather rough landing, Venera 7 made headlines by being the first to reach the planet's surface intact. Well, maybe a little bruised, and actually returned data for an entire 23 minutes after landing. Venera 8 did one better by surviving 63 minutes on the planet's surface before the high pressure and temperature ended its transmission. As part of its mission, this probe sent back data from the surface with measurements of the Venusian regolith and clouds and confirmed with certainty Venus's high surface temperature and pressure. Up next, the Mariner 10 was the first to return close-up pictures of Venus from orbit. Then Venera's 11 and 12 both landed on the surface successfully and were able to gather and transmit data for over an hour each. These two landers collected data on Venusian thunder, lightning, and cloud components, such as sulfur. The Venera program concluded in 1983 with versions 15 and 16. These two orbiters transmitted surface details specifically from the northern latitudes of Venus. In 1985, the Soviet Union began its Vega program, sending two spacecraft, Vegas 1 and 2, to explore the thick cloud layer atmosphere of Venus. These two spacecraft released two balloons into the Venusian atmosphere, which were able to transmit data for more than 46 hours, taking measurements of the most active layer of the Venusian cloud system. The Magellan mission launched in 1990 and lasted more than 4 years until radio contact was lost. Magellan mapped the surface of Venus, much like the upcoming Veritas mission will do. The images from Magellan have helped scientists better understand Venus's interior, including plate tectonics, impact craters, and surface erosion. Following several Venus flybys by Messenger, Cassini, and Galileo, the European Space Agency launched its Venus Express in 2006 to study the atmosphere and plasma of Venus. It lasted 8 years before it made a suicidal plunge into the Venusian atmosphere. Numerous experiments were conducted throughout that mission, some of which included examining Venus's greenhouse effect, the atmosphere's response to the solar wind, and the characteristics of the planet's magnetic field. Currently, Japan's Akatsuki spacecraft is actively orbiting Venus, obtaining meteorological information about the planet. After so many years of exploration and so many missions, to this day, only 4 spacecraft ever have returned images from the surface of Venus, and they were all from the Soviet Union's Venera program. Like the missions on Mars, we study Venus to learn about its history, our own history, and the history of the entire universe. By continuing to study Venus, we can learn about the evolution of Earth-like planets, including many of the newest exoplanets being discovered. Venus also aids in the modeling of Earth's climate and serves as a sobering example of how quickly a planet's temperature can change. Previous missions to Venus taught us that granite-like rocks, needing a lot of water to develop, are present on the planet. In fact, scientists believe that Venus may have had liquid water on its surface for 2 billion years during the early solar system's colder period. Given that water is essential to life, did Venus formerly support life? According to scientists, life may already be present in Venus's upper atmosphere, about 50 kilometers or 31 miles above the planet's surface. As we mentioned earlier, the temperature and pressure at this altitude are rather pleasant and quite similar to Earth. Well, that is if you can stand the sulfuric acid rain. In 2020, scientists reported something else quite unusual at this altitude: enigmatic little black spots absorbing most of the planet's solar energy. This mysterious matter turned out to be phosphine, a substance that, at least on Earth, is produced by a type of microbe that thrives well in low oxygen environments. Interesting. We've been scouring the universe for life, and we may have just found it in the atmosphere of our closest neighbor. Maybe the sulfuric acid rain isn't so bad after all. This potential sign of life has prompted lots of imaginative ideas of how humans might live on Venus. The most prominent concept involves living within the thick cloud atmosphere, 50 kilometers or 31 miles above the planet's surface, in floating habitats. Imagine, if you will, a collection of zeppelins tied together. These floating settlements would act as a home base from which to gradually terraform the planet to suit our earthly needs, until we are finally able to migrate to the surface and establish permanent residence on Venus. So what do you think? Would you volunteer to be one of the first colonists to live in the floating habitats on Venus? Let us know in the comments.